Hi, and welcome to the AI at Work podcast by Gemini. Within each episode, we will have experts across industries to go beyond the hype and explore what AI really means for our jobs. Whether you're excited, unsure, or a bit worried about AI entering the workplace, you are at the right spot. We'll break it down with real stories, practical insights, and expert tips to help you make sense of this change. Let's dive together into the future of work and get started with today's episode.
Welcome back to the AI at Work podcast. My name is Jakob Teubert. I'm a workplace consultant living in Switzerland, and I've been working on AI a lot in the past. And when you look at recent studies showing what are the benefits of AI, it's always about time savings, productivity gains, generating output quicker and better, which is awesome for the economy. And in an economic-driven world, that seems to be the goal to go to. But some people, including myself and my guest today, are a little bit concerned about who is safeguarding meaning and mental health at work when AI is introduced only as a productivity tool. And that's why I'm happy that Johann Zillmann is joining me today. He has a lot of years experience in consulting, and in consulting can be quite fast-paced. So he knows how to juggle the balance between productivity and mental health. So I'm really happy that we have someone experienced like you today. Would you maybe introduce yourself in one quick sentence on what you've been doing in the past and why you're here today, Johann?
Sure. Thank you for the invitation, by the way, Jacob. So Johann Zillmann, I am actually doing consulting indeed for almost 20 years. Work for several large consulting companies, and I'm always interested in the future of work, actually from my inception into the corporate world. Basically starting with my university degree and then also internships to kind of learn where the future is taking us, if you will, also with more technology infusion. So that's has been always my passion. And indeed, as you said, we are at the moment, it feels like at the dawn of something happening out there, which really impacts people big time in many regards, but also societies and economies as a whole. So I'm very pleased to be with you today. So I've done everything from kind of on-the-ground project work around digitization, but also recently more AI type of work, but also thought leadership, working with different institutes, and also coaching and teaching to people and really helping them to kind of embrace that future for themselves and seize it as an opportunity and not a threat.
Awesome. I think that's perfect that you're here today. Mm-hmm. Before we dive into the topic, and I'm going to ask you the first question, I would love to start with 3 statements that I would like you to end for me. So there's a blank at the end of the sentence, and you just fill in whatever is coming to your mind. The first sentence would be, the biggest risk of introducing AI into the workplace without reflection is?
Well, certainly job loss at scale, if it's not being managed properly. At least that's what I'm hearing if I'm talking to CXOs these days. Though I must say we're currently at a stage where this is not happening, at least in most of the sectors which we are seeing at the moment. Main reason being that it's that AI primarily augments work but doesn't replace human work. I think that's quite important. So people are more and more playing around, but also kind of using AI as productivity tools. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't mean kind of that their job will be in danger, but it only means that they can get more work done in a day, right? Because we know that for most professions, there's always work done at the end of the day. So I think this fear didn't really unfold yet. Mm-hmm. However, what we need to pay attention to, and that's the reflection part of your email, of your statement, is that we are starting to make ourselves aware what is truly human in our work. Mm-hmm. And what can we hand over to more intelligent algorithms as we move forward to kind of take out the boring part, if you will, out of our work, which is more like the transactional and manual activities, if you will, or also help to make our work more insightful and actually help us to focus on what we are doing best. And that is actually human ingenuity or creativity put into corporate context, which equals innovation. And that's something to focus on. And then one last sentence around that. When we talk about reflection, we really, really need to be careful here because we are like Prometheus playing with fire a bit at the moment around biases, mm-hmm. because AI is only so good as you kind of program is, and there could be bias within. We actually see that in the HR space when it comes to hiring and promotion decisions. Need to be super careful around that. Data privacy. because especially personal data we want to be careful with. So those are the things which are real, which are out there, and which need to be governed.
I really love your answer, even though it's a really, really long statement in the end that you ended here. But you touched on many, many important things that we are sure going to cover in this episode later. We'll come back to this. The second statement is, to ensure AI empowers rather than dehumanizes work, we need to prioritize.
We need to prioritize the truly human work, as I just mentioned, that we are designing AI around humans. So we call that human-centric design, and not actually accommodating what AI does and can do, but really kind of plugging AI into the humans. And actually, we need to make sure that there is still purpose and meaning in what we are doing ourselves. Because for the whole of humanity, work became at least something where we find purpose and meaning in, and that is something which we should retain.
Awesome. So let's keep the meaning and make it human-centric. We will come back to this as well. The last of those three statements is, in a future where AI is everywhere, what will make us feel truly human at work?
It is about bringing our own self to work and being able to not only define our own vision or mission in life, but actually tying it to our job, because our job always requires a certain percentage basically of our waking hours, and connecting with other human beings at the workplace. So I think this is quite important, that we are not losing those, but that actually we're focusing on the type of work which we are doing, how we are collaborating, and also the work products which we are producing together with AI. And there's a promise and there's a peril coming with AI. The promise is that AI will help us to solve the big problems in our society or in our world which we are facing. In the healthcare sector, for instance, when it comes to diseases, cancer, right? But also when it comes to environmental issues, AI can really help us in that space. But we should really focus on, how should I say, purpose-driven and AI which is supporting the progress of humanity, rather than on AI which keeps us busy and engages us on our smartphones like a record share, right? Keeps us busy but doesn't get us anywhere.
Okay, interesting. The last thing you mentioned is reminding me of social media, actually, because that's exactly what is happening on Facebook and on Instagram and stuff like this. Isn't there a threat that AI will do the same when the same companies who are building those social media networks are also building the foundation models that we are using to gain productivity at work?
Yes, this risk exists, and there's very interesting research, by the way, from the Human Institute on the West Coast, namely by Tristan Harris and his team, and that's the huge challenge which we are seeing. Social media since the 2010s was actually the first wave of AI, although we don't recognize it as the first wave of AI. But if you take a look at increasingly smarter algorithms actually keeping us engaged, so optimizing for engagement, and we actually see what it has done to our reptile brains, if you will, in terms of keeping us engaged and tied to these social media platforms and impacting our attention span and also kind of our social life, not always positively. And there's certainly a threat related to that. And what we need to solve for, that's why I mentioned that deliberately in my last statement, is that we are optimizing for something which brings us forward, which doesn't divide us, if you will, politically, for instance, but really kind of helps us with our social fabric and our shared reality eventually. And that is a huge task in the entertainment business, for instance, or social media, as we call it. And on the workplace, it's really about tying AI to the purpose of the company and making sure that people are able to focus on where they can add most value themselves without being concerned that their job will get obsolete, because there's always work to do usually. And it's about growing the pie, rather than thinking about workforce downsizing per se.
Okay, so you're saying on one side, organizations should focus on growing the pie, not reducing the workforce. What other things do you see as important on the perspective of an organization to make sure that the people are not afraid, that they are on board and they can thrive purposefully in their work, at work with AI?
I think what is important is that AI is being positioned as an ally rather than an enemy to people's jobs, right? And that really means generally, how does AI help you to perform your job better, to free yourself up to do what you really want to do, to gain interesting insights, to not become too complacent in your work, right? In terms of copy pasting something from ChatGPT or Copilot and don't do the human due diligence over it. So really seeing it as an enrichment, or at least a starting point to your work when you're doing research, for instance, on a particular topic. Secondly, I think it's important that everybody who works augmented in AI, and we see it primarily at the moment in the white-collar professions, is also increasing one's accountability and thus eventually agency about his or her own career, and also job in terms of the job structure and how do you actually structure your work and how do you add value yourselves. Because in the traditional world, your job felt to be quite determined by your job descriptions. That will be not the case anymore in the future. I think AI will give you the freedom to free up time.
Okay.
And the question is, how do you reinvest that time yourself? How do you increasingly build trust in the AI? But also, how
Sorry
do you...
to interrupt you here. Just so that I get along. Are you saying that with AI we have a chance or a risk or an opportunity that people become more autonomous in their work and need to become more autonomous and decide on their own where they want to go, and not so much the organization saying, hey, this is your role, this is what you have to do?
Correct. That's a very important point, because an AI will provide you insight, and it already provides people insights into aspects of their work, or a research topic, a content topic which they are searching about, or how they are spending their time at the moment. We'll come to that certainly in a minute when we talk about the relationship of AI and well-being at work, which people might not be aware of, which are white spots. And then actually we are supposed to connect the dots and actually say, hey, I can use this to kind of maybe propose this type of initiative, or actually propose this type of change to something which we are doing at the moment, which will actually help us to work more efficiently, win more customers. And that's basically what I'm meaning by growing that pie in terms of increasing the revenue. So it's about accountability and agency. And it's often very difficult to do that in the corporate world if you are used for decades, or at least for years, to kind of work your job as you're supposed to do per your job description. And that won't be the case anymore. So you need to look left and right and actually see, how can I add more value? Because I got these tools at hand right now, which are giving me unprecedented power, but I need to actually learn how can I tame that power and how can I funnel that to add most value myself as well. Plus, of course, how can I constantly up and reskill myself when we talk about prompting, for instance, on generative AI, to add more value and enrich my job, and eventually the value which I'm adding to the company, right? To make myself more valuable. And this is something which doesn't come natural to many people. And this is also one of the changes I'm seeing in the workplace at the moment.
When you're saying, before we go to well-being, just on your last sentence, when you're saying this doesn't come naturally to people, how do you think organizations can implement this within their workplace? Or if it's not coming naturally, who's in charge of bringing this to the people?
I really much believe in the power of direct leadership.
Okay.
I believe in the leaders being the role models to the employees when it comes to embracing step change. And we certainly see a step change with the proliferation of AI technologies on the workplace. So I believe in sharing success stories, daily work, how the daily work has been changed for a leader, and also sharing experiences in terms of which use case work well for whom, and actually how did it help people to free up time to enrich the reports which they are creating, for instance, in the finance space, and for other people to adopt that as well, or actually to build up on it. One of the key differentiators from us as human beings as opposed to other species is that we are very strong, especially in co-innovation. So if we're coming together, if we're discussing how this new breakthrough technology is actually changing our work, then actually we can build up on that and actually create that virtuous cycle of learning from each other. But that requires that we are proactively addressing any fears of job loss, but rather talk about adding more value to the company as a whole.
Okay, I see. So building a community, leadership role modeling, and having a positive change story rather than a fear-driven one. Thank you very much for your insights on this. We've been talking about well-being already, and we've been talking also a lot of the productivity gains and value gains that AI will bring. But don't you see a threat that when a powerful tool like AI is being introduced at the workplace, that some people will fear they lose their job, that some people will feel that they are not valuable anymore because a machine can do the job much better than they can do? Who is safeguarding well-being and this purpose that we also get from our work within the organizations?
That's something which neither the employees themselves nor often the leaders can't do. And why is that? Because in organizations you often have microcultures, and especially in a kind of type A driven meritocratic environment, it's sometimes difficult to take that step back and say, hey, look, let's take a look at what this actually does to our job. And if we're working more and if we're getting more exhausted because kind of work is being put off our plates, we're putting new work on our plates, right? And we are kind of going into this virtuous circle. It can become quite quickly a vicious circle when it comes to a burnout risk, for instance, and well-being. And that's exactly where I think there's an opportunity. So first off, it needs an institution, a body outside of that team microculture, if you will, which is typically HR, but doesn't need to be HR. So kind of an healthy, safety, and environmental kind of department, which we sometimes see in the production sector, which is focusing on blue-collar professions. We need to have something in organizations, and organizations are building that. Often it's also related to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives to actually focus on well-being. And the beauty of AI is also, again, talking about promise and peril, is that AI can, and it does it already. You see, for instance, if you're using Microsoft and it provides you your daily mood, if you just only would listen to it, right, and actually, or at least document it. There is AI out there which actually helps you to kind of check your well-being whilst at work. You can, of course, combine it also with variables and actually tracking certain biometric data about yourself to actually size your stress level exactly, right? For instance, via a smartwatch.
Yes.
And then if you're building that little ecosystem to kind of track the employees' stress level, I'm often doing that via my ring. Actually, you reflect at the end of the day and actually see when were the times where I was particularly under stress, and why was that when I scan through my diary, for instance, and how can I manage these situations better going forward? How many hours did I put into work, right? When did I work late night? Did I even switch on my device on the weekend to work, right? And how can I optimize that to kind of fit into my particular lifestyle best? And again, the technologies are out there. It's more like a matter of adaptation and adoption on the workplace, and that needs to be happening through a dedicated team or experts who are focusing on it, because otherwise you're pouring out the baby with the bathwater and you are freeing up people's time with AI, but they are loading on their plate additional work and eventually will get burned out, and that's a risk to be avoided by all means.
I totally see your point. AI is not just a threat to well-being, but it also can be used in a way that it actually benefits well-being. And you said the golden words here, that it's about adoption and adaptation. And you also said this is a team within the organization, HR or something else, should be responsible of pushing this to the company. Now, what I'm afraid of is I see in the organizations that we work with, they usually don't have those expertise. The HR team is flooded with their daily work. They usually cannot take something as well, and not all companies have a well-being team. What would you recommend to them? How should they work with AI to upskill themselves, maybe, or to be that safeguard within the organization?
Yeah, even if you don't have a well-being team, I think most companies, if you reach a certain size, actually have an HR department. So I think you should sensitize, for instance, HR business partners to make it part of their jobs to actually focus increasingly on well-being, because it is a pivotal point which we are reaching at the workflows at the moment, and it's something which we shouldn't downplay at all. There is a huge change coming people's way, and it needs to be managed properly. That's point number one. Point number two is learning programs, right? Again, talking about AI when it comes to training, to individual learning paths, learning recommendations, and really doing that around the employee herself. There's even AI-generated podcasts, right, which you can listen at night or kind of on your way home when you're commuting. And I think it's a time to also reflect upon what you have done and what you really spent your time on. Because what I experience often out there in the field, that there's a lot of people who are actually keeping themselves busy, me sometimes included, with a lot of meetings during the day. The question is, were all of those meetings effective? Did you all need to attend those meetings? Or is there an opportunity with AI again to summarize those meetings and get your main points, your notes, your actions out of it, right, and execute respectively? So I think that speaks back to what I mentioned around accountability and agency. There's an opportunity to work smarter and not harder going forward, and you should do it in AI-enabled, with training programs, with well-being programs, with light support, at least if you're a smaller organization, from your HR department at least, and also with leaders who are embracing their new role in an AI-augmented workplace and are walking their talk themselves and are stepping into a very inclusive sharing culture with their employees.
Thank you very much for all your views and expertise within this talk. From your last statement, I get, even though when agents are coming to the workplace, the agency will not be taken away from us humans and not from the leaders. So that's what I take from our conversation. I thank you very much for this. I hope the listeners will listen the next time when we're talking about AI at work, even though there are AI-generated podcasts already out there. Thank you very much, Johann, for being here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on AI at work. Next month, we'll shift focus to the stories we tell about AI. We'll be demystifying the myths, those quiet assumptions that shape how we build, trust, and live with intelligent systems. Until then, keep questioning, keep shaping, and keep showing up with purpose.